Today I'm speaking with someone who builds brands people don't just like but love. Co-founder of giffgaff and former marketing director of Beavertown. Welcome to Brands&Culture, Tom. So nice to have you.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
Tom, tell me, if you're a brand like one of my favorites, Beavertown, what does it take to build that emotional connection?
Yeah, I think emotional connection is about the values the brand has and how it connects with people. And I think that you need to go beyond the functional basis of what the product does or what the brand does, right? It's a hygiene factor. People want to buy something and it does the thing you buy it for. But when brands truly tap in and can connect with people on that emotional level, through values, through magical moments, through surprises, that's really where you start to get that human connection and that feeling.
Can you give me a very practical example, I don't know, from Beavertown or from one of the brands you worked on, of moving beyond that surface level connection?
Yeah, I think all great brands are both rational and emotional. You know, if I think back to giffgaff, you want a SIM card, you want to put it in your phone and you want it to work. So you need to tick that box. Once you've ticked that box, then you can start to move into the more emotional territory. You know, we did lots of stuff at giffgaff and at Beavertown as well with different causes and charities. We did something with mental health and the campaign against living miserably calm at Beavertown. And that really takes the brand into a completely different space than certainly you would just sit if you just thought about things in a functional way.
Amazing. And both brands that you worked with, the Beavertown and giffgaff, they grew so fast. How do you grow and scale without losing that special factor in the first place?
Yeah, and I think that scaling and keeping what I would call the magic is the single most important thing you need to do.
Yeah.
I think certainly in the early days of a brand, when it's much more organic and it feels much more natural, you have an energy, you have a magic, and it's really important to be able to capture that because as you grow, you come under different challenges, different pressures, the head counts are bigger, people think differently than you might have thought at the start. By capturing that magic right at the start and understanding it, as you scale, that can become your fire and your fuel rather than something that might hold you back or something that you then try to retrospectively set. So understand that early, understand the why, and then that becomes the fuel to take your growth forward.
Both Beavertown and giffgaff challenge their categories. What does it take to build a challenger brand today?
I think challenger brands have changed actually. I think certainly over the last kind of 10, 15 years. I think before it was about just being the opposite of what was there. It might be greater choice, it might be cheaper, it might be higher frequency. I think that actually now you need to be disruptive, but you need to have a point. You need to add some greater level of value to the environment, to the customer, but also the customer's world. And I think that that is absolutely pivotal for the type of brands that want to be disruptive.
Yeah, I always say that we live in the times of drought of perspectives. It's so tricky, it's so scary to have your point of view, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what the really big question, it was an interesting study done at the tail end of last year, 2025, which was how long can brands not be political?
Oh, yeah.
Right? We live in a increasingly diverse and often very troubling political world, both a small p and a big P. How long can brands sit outside that when everyone else is getting dragged into those types of conversations?
How do you explain to your CFO that cultural marketing is worth the investment?
I think the funny thing is about explaining stuff to CFOs. I think CFOs get a bad rep to start with. I've always had a really great relationship with them. I think to answer the question, you need to go up a level actually, which is around how do you help people within a business as a marketeer, as a brand person, to help them understand why that business is there, why they're doing what they're doing, and why they then execute the marketing that they're executing, which includes cultural stuff, rather than get into a conversation about A and B, and is A worth the money or should we do more B? I think if you can understand that macro picture, and help the business feel passionate about that and help them feel involved. So not just checking and marking the homework, but actually involved in painting that story for consumers. I think that gets you into a much better position than getting in the trenches and fighting, which of course everyone has to every now and again, but I think having that macro conversation really helps.
Yeah, it sounds like the CFOs you had a chance to work with potentially, it sounds like they loved you.
You'd have to ask them. Possibly not all of them, maybe some of them.
Okay, let's forget about the businessy stuff. Let's chat about culture away from marketing decks. What does it mean to you on that very personal level?
Yeah, well, you know, I think regardless of who you are, we are all a part of culture. We all consume culture, and culture can mean many different things to you. It can mean high art, it can mean going to the football, it can mean the books you read, it can mean, you know, the political situation that you're involved in. And all of those things have to translate into how we view the world, and all great brands need to have a view on the world, so they need to be part of that culture, they need to be weaved into it, they need to breathe it, they need to live it. They can't just live in isolation, and they can't just live separate from everything else. So, you know, culture to me is everything. It's a difference between having an ultimate power and having magic within yourself and within your brand, and not having it.
Yeah. And thinking back, what was that very first cultural thing you were obsessed with as a kid, let's say?
Yeah. So look, I'm probably showing my age, but you know, I grew up in kind of peak heavy metal era, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when I was about 11 or 12 getting Guns N' Roses' usual Illusion 1, and it just blew my mind, right? That kind of spirit of kind of sex, drugs and rock and roll just had a natural energy, had a natural disruption, had a natural anarchy about it that was against that kind of status quo. You know, you've got to remember that at that time, late 80s, early 90s, you know, they were quote unquote the most dangerous band in the world, right? Which now seems, you know, kind of funny when everyone gets a bit older and, you know, all the rest of it. That to me plugs you into a spirit and an energy. And I think once you understand and once you start to be able to feel that spirit and energy as part of culture and what culture does to people, you can start to see it in different elements of your life as you progress, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you can understand that and start to feel it naturally, you can understand how it starts to play a role in society, and then how you might apply it to the brands you work on or the brands you consume as a consumer.
Yeah, wow, that's impressive. And today, where do you go today to stay culturally sharp and inspired?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, you know, when I grew up, it was peak MTV, right? You just sat down in front of MTV
I
or
remember
MTV2
that time.
and you just watched music videos for hours, and then you went and read about them in magazines, and bought the albums, and that was kind of it, right? And then you were, you know, consuming music culture. It's obviously now so much more diverse, and I think the growth of platforms like Substack, where people can share short little clips of things that they're passionate in, or really long articles, gives people the ability to consume quickly or go into much depth. I don't think there's one place that I go to that I say, well, this is my Bible of everything culture. I think you just go around like a magpie and you just take it from lots of different places, and that jigsaw is then what you put together to be my culture or your culture or our representation of what we're passionate about. And I think we should feel empowered to do that. The good thing about culture, like any art, there's no wrong or right answer to it.
Do you remember a moment when your personal interests really influenced your marketing decision?
Yeah, I actually try to let my personal interests not influence my marketing decision. I think that too often marketing is influenced by people's personal opinions and not data and not fact.
Okay.
And I think that you need to, as a marketeer, think about insight that's consumer driven and apply that to what you're doing. Now, of course, I think you will always have some sort of unconscious bias that comes in, particularly when you're making big campaigns and you're choosing, I don't know, the song to go on the TV ad. You're always going to have some sort of bias that's going to play out there. But I think it's important to base the decisions not on your personal opinion, but on the data and the insight that you've got that you think is relevant for the consumer and that campaign or brand or product.
Okay, but where is this challenger mindset of yours? You are such a challenger, I would say, when I look at your work. Where is it coming from? So you said there's no taste involved in your work? These are two different things, opinion and taste?
I think opinion and taste are different. I think, you can't buy taste and you can't buy style. It's something that you just kind of have.
Yeah.
I think I was raised to challenge everything, which I think has its pros and cons. I think that I never think that just because something is the status quo that that's necessarily the right way to do it. It doesn't mean that you need to kick down every door and turn over every table. Thank you. But I do think that we should always question everything, particularly things that just seem to exist and no one really understands why. And I think for brands and for businesses, when there's no clear consumer benefit, we should question that. And I think that came through in the work that myself and lots of very talented people did at both giffgaff and Beavertown. I think we should challenge the status quo and we should look to be positively disruptive for the consumer.
Yeah. And finally, can you tell me what are your cultural predictions for 2026?
Yeah, so my cultural predictions for this year are, I think people want sanity over vanity. So I think that aspirational world, for the sake of being aspirational and looking good, I think will become devalued. I think people still want aspirational brands, but I think they want them to add something. I think they want a device with aspiration, because the world's difficult, it's getting more difficult, everyone's stuck in the mud, and I think people want brands and influencers and content makers to help them understand how to get out of the mud, right? And I think that that's really, really important as we go forward. So I think that aspiration with advice, sanity over vanity, is where I would say the sort of strongest area for brands to play in 2026 and going forward.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to see you at Brands&Culture in London.
Pleasure. Look forward to it.
See you there. Thank you so much.